Hey there. Hey Danny, how's it going? Hey Ashley. Hey Pilar. How's your guys this weekend? What's going on today? Hey Madeline, my weekend is so far so good. Hey Alicia, what's going on? I know I normally do these on Friday, but I was exhausted yesterday. So I have a special topic for us to talk about today. Alright, so we got a decent number of people in here. I'm going to go ahead and start talking about what I want to talk about today, which is physical mediumship and physical mediumship phenomena. So, there are a slew of mediums out there. It's like you can't turn a corner in the physical world or in the virtual world without bumping into someone who works or practices as a medium. And most of the time when someone says medium, or you start talking about people who are mediums, what you're referring to are mental mediums. So mental mediumship is the process by which spirit communicates to the sitters or to their loved ones via the medium, and the medium is the interpreter to pass forward that message. It's a mental process, to where the medium is receiving mental thoughts, feelings, pictures, emotions, memories, and putting those pieces together to communicate the message that the loved one in spirit wants their sitters to know. Most people have an understanding of that. That's very common. We see it on TV. We see it with Teresa Caputo, the Long Island medium. We see it with John Edward. We see it with James Van Praagh. We see it with Lisa Williams, John Holland. All of these mediums that we watch on TV. They're mental mediums. But there is an aspect of mediumship which is becoming more popular as of lately. And the interesting thing about it is that it's not a new phenomena at all, but it's physical mediumship. So physical mediumship was incredibly popular. It was actually more of the norm than mental mediumship in the Victorian era. And as time went on, I think the needs of people and what certain people or what certain mediums were able to accomplish sort of evolved into more of mental mediumship. So to give you an understanding of physical mediumship or physical phenomena, physical mediumship is objective. So it is the ability of a medium to produce phenomena that isn't taking place within the mind of the medium, but is actually taking place externally in the room, that all of the participants of the seance or the circle are able to see, witness, and experience. So there's a whole variety of aspects of physical mediumship. So one aspect that that people might be familiar with is this concept of ectoplasm. I'm going to talk about that because when you say ectoplasm, a lot of people think of Ghostbusters and green slime, and that is not the case at all. But for the most part, ectoplasm is a fundamental aspect of being able to produce physical phenomena, as well as deep trance or amnesic trance. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about trance mediumship too, just to give you an idea of how this process works. But some of the common experiences that come from mental mediumship may include, but are not limited to, what's known as independent or direct voice. And that is where, as you're sitting in the seance room, literal voices come through and speak. And it's not it's not trance. The voices aren't coming through the medium's body. They're coming from different places in the room, and they are the actual voices of the spirit people, and you can carry on these conversations with spirit controls or guides or deceased loved ones just as clearly as you would be able to pick up the phone and call your brother or your sister or your mother. It's a direct voice-to-voice communication, and I will talk about how that process works. So, with physical mediumship, a physical medium has the ability to put themselves into a deep trance state. So I want to talk about trance mediumship for a second, because some people I've seen refer to trance mediumship as physical mediumship, and that's not the case. Trance mediumship is an aspect of mental mediumship, but for those who can go deep into that trance, they may develop as a physical medium. So what happens is that the medium is able to sort of put themselves into a very deep, altered, or disassociative state and sort of move a portion of their consciousness to the side or disconnect a little bit. And the spirit people then blend or step into the auric field of the medium and use that field to kind of plug into the physiology and the neurology of the medium to produce different effects. So for most trance mediums, what they're bringing through is philosophy. So a spirit teacher or a higher guide may come in and blend with the medium and use their vocal cords to communicate messages, philosophy, spiritual teachings. I think it's incredibly rare, but the late Gordon Higginson used to do trance clairvoyance, in which case he had a spirit control by the name of Patty, who would come through and sort of act as a medium for people participating in the circle. So in the same way that mental mediums might say, I have your mother here, she's talking about the blue dress, she wants you to know that, you know, she's happy that you had slippers on her in the casket instead of those dress shoes, or, you know, while the medium is unconscious, that spirit control is acting as the medium and passing messages from the spirit world to the sitters. So that's usually what happens. You know, there's philosophy, there may be trance clairvoyance where evidence is given, and you know, sometimes there's trance healing if that particular medium's path is more of the healing, where spirit healers blend and heal through the medium in sort of a hands-on kind of way. But with the physical medium, what happens is, as they put themselves into trance, their spirit operators blend with them and make certain adjustments to the chemistry of the medium's body, and they're able to produce ectoplasm. So ectoplasm is sort of this protoplasmic substance. It's kind of in between physical and non-physical, sort of an in-between substance. And it can look different ways. Usually it's white. You know, back in the Victorian era, you can see some seance photographs where there's sort of a white billowy substance that comes out of, you know, the nose or the eyes or the ears or the throat or the solar plexus of the medium. And then that is used and manipulated by spirit to manipulate some of the physical objects and create some of the physical phenomena. Now, a lot of those seance photographs that you would see are fraudulent. You know, it would be cheesecloth or chiffon or, you know, different materials. There was a lot of fraudulent behavior during the heyday of physical mediumship, which is why it kind of fizzled out and sort of lost a lot of credibility. But ectoplasm can be different densities, different thicknesses, different colors, but usually it's sort of a whitish color and will appear as sort of a cross between a smoke or cloth-like substance. So in the case of voice phenomena, it kind of breaks apart into two different elements or two different aspects. So one is direct voice, and the other is independent voice. So direct voice is sometimes known as trumpet mediumship. So, and Bev, if you're not watching and you see this later, you're finally going to get your explanation about the trumpet. I'm going to reveal the mystery of the trumpet to you, because I know you didn't quite understand that. So, in that instance, I'll just sort of set the tone for you. So, most mediums work in a particular space, a seance room, which is, I'm in my seance room now. Most mediums work in a seance room or a place that's specifically dedicated for physical phenomena seances. And the thing about it, and I guess maybe this is a good time to talk about this, and I want to say here too, I by no means am an expert on physical phenomena. I do not consider myself a physical medium, though I have been sitting for the past year and a half working at developing. But physical mediumship, if you're able to develop it at all, can take many, 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 many years, so you cannot have an expectation of developing at all or what that development would look like. So I just want to get that out of the way. I'm by no means an expert, or by no means at this point do I consider myself a physical medium. But, so, disclaimer out of the way. But, physical mediumship is often based off of, the ability to produce this phenomena is often based off of that ectoplasmic substance. And the thing about it is ectoplasmic substance is incredibly light sensitive. So most seances are done in complete blackness, no white light, because the ectoplasm usually is not able to form or sustain itself in white light. This also leads to fraudulent behavior, because when you're in a dark room, it's very easy to commit trickery and fraudulent practices. However, some mediums will work in very low red light. Red light has a different frequency where if the medium is more advanced or developed in their physical mediumship, they may be able to sustain ectoplasm, or the spirit team that works with them may be able to sustain ectoplasm in red light. A lot of people today are saying, that all physical mediums need to work in at least red light, some lighted conditions, because recently, probably a year or so ago, there was a particularly well-known physical medium who was caught cheating because there was a infrared camera in the seance room, and it turned out that he was fraudulent, or at least in that particular seance was fraudulent. So, and I understand why people say that, but the thing about it is, you can't guarantee that what one medium is able to accomplish in light, that another medium is going to be able to. I believe it was Alec Harris, who was a South African physical medium, one of the best materialization mediums, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, was able to work in lighted conditions. There have been mediums of the past who've been able to work in white light. However, it is the exception and it is a rarity rather than the norm. Most physical mediums have to start out in darkness. A lot of them have to stay in darkness, but it really just depends on the medium, how much they work at it, the spirit team that works with them, the chemistry of their body, the harmony of the people who are partaking in the seance. So I think we can't hold all physical mediums to that expectation. But if a physical medium can work in red lighted conditions, that's fantastic and just adds more credibility to the phenomena. So in this darkened room, the sitters would come together. Usually it opens with some sort of a prayer, and then there's usually singing. Now, singing serves two purposes. It helps to lift the vibration, and sometimes it can sort of be a trigger for the medium to assist that medium into going into trance. The medium is often in a spirit cabinet, which is, it's not anything fancy. It's just an enclosed space, a small enclosed space. It could be as simple as a closet with like a curtain across the front, or sometimes they're constructed with like dowel rods or PVC pipe to just sort of create this little curtained box. And that acts as a container too for that medium's power and energy to build and amplify, to the necessary conditions to produce this phenomena. So as the medium is entranced, their body begins to exude this ectoplasm, or this ectoplasmic substance, and the spirit team or the spirit operators or the guides that work with either that group or that particular medium can then manipulate that substance. They can change its density, they can change its strength. It can be as soft as a cloud or as solid as metal, and it will often form these ectoplasmic rods that can lift and hold and move and manipulate the spirit trumpet. So this is a spirit trumpet. It's not really a trumpet. It's not a musical instrument. It's a very lightweight aluminum cone. They come in different sizes. Mine is collapsible. It originally had 3 parts, but I didn't need such a big trumpet since I'm in those very early stages of sitting for that development, so I just broke it down to the 2-piece. Collapses for travel and storage sake. But what it does is it acts as a megaphone to amplify the spirit voices, because especially at first they can be very faint if there's not a lot of power or there's not a sufficient energy or vibration in the room for the spirit phenomena to communicate. So what will happen is a lot of times there are luminous tape or luminous bands around the edge of the trumpet, because the room is dark, but you want to be able to see the trumpet and where it's at. So the ectoplasm will sort of form, I'll just use my hand as an example, like a rod, and it will lift or levitate the trumpet up to a place in the room. Now what happens is, inside the trumpet, the ectoplasm forms what's known as the ectoplasmic voice box, which is sort of like an ectoplasmic replica of the human larynx. And this sort of in-between substance allows the spirit communicators to step into more of a dense physical state to be able to vibrate, because they don't have a physical body, they don't have a physical voice box, they don't have a tongue, they don't have teeth, to be able to create the voice that physically we can hear. So the trumpet may just fly around the room, or it may go and your loved ones messages would come through the trumpet, and you might hear, hey Travis, this is Grandma, and whatever the messages are. Now, in the case of the fraudulent medium, about a year ago, he was caught manipulating, moving the trumpet and speaking through it himself when he was supposed to be tied to a chair. Now I know what you're thinking. Why is the medium tied to a chair? For exactly this reason, to be able to prevent fraud. So, especially if you're working in the dark, they want to take extra precautions to make sure that fraudulent behavior isn't happening. So a lot of times, the physical medium would be strapped to a chair, tied to a chair. They may be gagged, or have some sort of tape over their mouth, or in some instances when there were voice mediums, they used to make them hold water, dyed water in their mouth, to prove after the seance if the water was still there, then they could not have been the medium who was producing the voices. But, or sometimes, as I said, the trumpet just may move around. Now, if you're participating in one of these seances, there's a few things to look for to make sure that it is a legitimate voice experience. First thing is that if you're basing some of your assessment off the movement of the trumpet should be able to move in ways that a physical person might not be able to manipulate it. So it may be able to, move from this side of the room to the other side of the room, like that. Because if it was someone who was manipulating it or committing fraud, they wouldn't be able to navigate around the room in pitch dark and smooth and fluid motions from one end to the other without, bumping into someone, or it being very obvious that, it's sort of moving in alignment with footsteps. The speed at which it can move, or is it making patterns? Is it up on the ceiling where someone couldn't reach? These are things to look for. If there's more than one trumpet, are there multiple voices being communicated through different trumpets at the same time? That's another thing to look for that can sort of help dismiss the notion of a fraudulent medium. So That's the spirit trumpet. Now, there's another aspect of voice phenomena. So when it's through a trumpet or through some other device, it's known as a direct voice, or if the device is the trumpet, it's trumpet mediumship. There's another aspect to that which does not use any sort of a medium or a material, which is independent voice, because it's independent of needing any sort of conduit. The late Leslie Flint was a phenomenal, he still is, he's still alive in the spirit world, but probably was the, if not, one of the, if not the greatest independent voice mediums that there ever was, and one of the most documented mediums that there's ever been, period. Very studied by scientists and parapsychologists and physical researchers and stuff of that nature. So in that instance, the experience is very similar, except what happens is spirit, for Leslie, they would draw ectoplasm from the throat, and the voice box would form mid-air around the medium or extend to different parts of the room for those voices to communicate. 1 second here, let me grab a photo. So this is Leslie Flint, and one of the frequent communicators at almost every one of Leslie's seances was his spirit control, his guide, Mickey, who's hilarious. And the wonderful thing is the Leslie Flint Trust, I believe that's who's been putting them up, on YouTube. There's literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of Leslie Flint seances that you can listen to. So in these voice seances, sometimes you would get philosophy from different spirit communicators. A lot of times, you may have clairvoyance through Mickey, acting sort of as the medium, giving messages, and then sometimes it was the loved one themselves coming through and communicating. Now, once there's a strong energy or the medium's, more established, the voices should sound like, if that's your grandma, it should sound like your grandma. If that was, your brother or sister, you should be able to tell that that's your brother or your sister because you recognize their voice. In some of the early stages, or if the energy is very weak, the voice might not sound exactly like it, exactly like that person used to, because there's a distortion. We're coming from different vibrations. It's sort of an interpenetrating between the two worlds. So that's often the case in the beginning, but the longer that communication is established, it should sound more and more like your loved one that's communicating. So that is direct and independent voice. Sometimes what you will get in a seance is the production of spirit lights, and spirit lights are exactly what they sound like. It's lights that are produced in the darkness by the spirit world. Now, in one of the seances that I've participated in, a particular guide, a particular spirit control that came through would always announce their presence via spirit light, and it really just looked like a ball of light that would zip around the room and make different patterns. It wasn't, you could tell it wasn't projected onto any surface. It was an independent, self-illuminated orb, and it moved at phenomenal speeds and made amazing patterns in the middle of the air, and reacted in response to the sitters speaking and communicating at it. So spirit lights can look many, many different ways. They can be many, many different colors. The spirit lights that I have witnessed have been white. So you may have spirit lights. Apports is another thing that I will touch on. So apports is when the spirit world brings things into the seance room that were not there. They sort of teleport them in a way. Now there's different ways that they may do this. So let's say we, during the seance, you turn on the lights and all of a sudden there's flowers everywhere, and there weren't flowers when you went into the room, when you locked the door, when you tied the medium to the chair. The spirit world brings these things to us, and they do this by they locate somewhere in the world or somewhere in the ethers these items that they want to bring into the room, and they affect the vibrational the vibrational rate of the object, and they speed it up until it's moving so fast they can sort of disperse it. They can disintegrate it, so to speak, and then via thought and mental direction can move that item or rematerialize it and slow the vibration down, and it sort of reforms or reconstitutes in the seance room. Sometimes what will happen too is they may not take an object and move it from one place to the seance room, but they may find an object and sort of almost use the molecular structure to sort of create like a replica of that object and bring that to the seance room. Now, I know I've mentioned fraud, and there are some physical mediums that have been visiting the United States more and have been gaining a popularity, who are known for their apports. And I've not sat with those mediums, so I can't say for sure, but there are elements of this that I think are fishy to me. So for me, if the spirit world wants to bring something to, or even take something away, as far as apport or asport, when they remove something, they absolutely can. But what I have a hard time with, there's some of these mediums who are, they're allegedly producing like crystals and diamonds from their eyeballs, from their ears, from their nose. The one that I have the hardest time with, and I know that this has happened in genuine ways before, where an apport may be produced through the body of the medium, where it may like come out of the mouth. But there's one medium in particular who's been like producing objects, jewelry, rings, watches, crystal stones, out of the mouth, and in daylight, which to me in itself is a little bit suspicious. Either he's extremely phenomenal at what he does, or he's a complete fraud. Regurgitation is an old magician's trick. Pushing things out of your eyeball does not impress me. Apporting crystals out of your ear does not impress me. Vomiting up a watch that supposedly comes from Saint Germain does not impress me. And the reason for this is because the spirit world is intelligent. They're not going to produce phenomena simply for the sake of phenomena. So, with all elements of mediumship, there needs to be evidence. There needs to be a reason. What is the reason for this communicator coming? What is the reason for this spirit approaching? So, I'll give an example of apports that I'm on board with. If you're, participating in a seance, and one of the main communicators that comes through is a spirit guide or control by the name of White Feather, and as you turn the lights on, a white feather is drifting down from the ceiling and lands on the table, that to me makes sense. It's a token, it's a touch, it's a reminder, it symbolizes White Feather. If you were if you were communicating with your grandmother, and then all of a sudden, when the seance is over, you've been apported one of your grandma's curlers that she used to wear in her hair, that's evidential. Or if you are in a seance and you're communicating with one of your loved ones who maybe, her house was decorated in elephants, and then when, the lights come on, you get an apport and it's a little carved elephant, that to me is evidential. Regurgitating watches from Saint Germain, or rings that don't fit people, they're wearing them around chains. If the spirit world's intelligent, they can't produce a ring that fits me. Or vomiting out plastic crystals that you could buy at the bargain bin at Lilydale. That to me is not evidential and doesn't sit right. Like I said, I've not sat with these mediums. I can't say for a fact that they are or not, genuine. But to me, it just doesn't impress me, and I'm a little iffy about the whole thing. So that's an apport. So we've talked about direct and independent voice. We've talked about spirit lights. We talked about apports. Now sometimes there's levitation. There's the levitation of the trumpet. but sometimes the sitters or the medium may be levitated in their chair, or certain things in the room may be levitated. So in some seance rooms, they may have items that have luminous tape or luminous paint on them, like glow-in-the-dark ping pong balls that spirit can sort of throw around the room and move, that you can observe that movement. Now, too, this is a good point to bring up table tipping, because someone asked about this on a video a few weeks ago. Table tipping it can be fun. Absolutely, it can be fun. It's considered an aspect of physical mediumship, but I don't believe that you need to be a physical medium to partake in table tipping, or to even get a response with table tipping. Very much in the same way that you don't need to be a medium to make a spirit board work. So usually in table tipping, there's at least 2 people around a table, and they may, ask questions, and the table will rock or move or jump. Now, I'm not impressed with a lot of table tipping. It's fun, and I think that you can absolutely get genuine physical, genuine messages through table tipping. But to me, just because you do some table tipping seances does not make you a physical medium. And, unless that table is moving and lifting up into the air without humans touching it, I would be very, underwhelmed with someone claiming that as physical phenomena. It just, I think as humans, we can generate energy that can manipulate these physical objects. So, seeing people with their fingers rested on a table and watching it slide across the floor, is it spirit? Maybe. Are they subconsciously doing this with an influence from spirit? Maybe. But unless the table is moving or levitating without human hands on it, I really wouldn't clump that into physical phenomena category. But not to dismiss or discourage anyone from table tipping, because as I said, it's fun, and I believe that you can get legitimate messages through the table, spelling out messages or tipping in certain ways to indicate yes and no. But I think too, we have to be very discerning in what we say. This is a levitation, because I've seen some things that I would not consider genuine spirit levitation. I think that the human hand played a role in the influence of that. So that's, I do want to touch on that. Sometimes you will have independent writing, sometimes known as slate writing, to where there are basically like little chalkboards or little slates in the room, and spirit may write messages or leave messages. Sometimes it's just a plain slate with chalk. Other times, some of the old slates I've seen, they're 2 slates together, and they there's little hinges on the end, so they fold together like a book, kind of like this. They flap together, and there is a piece of chalk in the middle. And then when the slates are opened up, and this can be done in light because the darkness is in between the 2 slates, the messages appear. Now, another aspect of physical mediumship phenomena that I want to touch on is precipitation mediumship. And then I want to talk about some of the energy-based stuff. So, spirit precipitation is a form of spirit art where spirit will sort of energetically imprint images on a piece of paper or a canvas. Probably the 2 most famous precipitation mediums were the Bangs sisters, May and Lizzie Bangs, who had a home in Camp Chesterfield. And if you ever get the chance to go to Camp Chesterfield, please check out their museum. There's just a crazy amount of the most insanely beautiful precipitated spirit portraits. So what would happen is people would come to these women, and in the early days it started that they would be in a darkened room, but there was a source of light, which was the window. So what would happen is they would prop the canvas up, or 2 pieces of canvas, in the window and pull the curtains close, so the only light was what was coming through the canvas, so you could see the canvas and through the material. And as the two women, as May and Lizzie, would sit and talk with you, or maybe give you some messages in more of a mental way, it would almost, you would start to see outlines and shapes and haze, and eventually you would start to see depictions of your spirit loved ones on the canvas. And then at the end of the sitting, they'd draw the blinds and take the two canvases apart, and on one side, on one of the canvases, would be a beautiful, gorgeous, gorgeous painting. Looks like a painting of your loved one, of a spirit communicator. Now, the interesting thing about these is if you've ever had the chance to see genuine spirit precipitation, like some of the pictures at the museum at Chesterfield, or there's a couple of the Bang sisters, I believe, at the museum in Lilydale, you'll notice that there is exquisite detail. And the really fascinating thing about the Bang sisters' portraits is that when you look at them, they are not painted. There are no brushstrokes. The closest description of the substance of which the images are formed from is almost like a dust. It almost looks airbrushed, but it comes off very easily. So they have to take a lot of precautions, especially too with things like temperature and light in the museum. But the closest thing that they've ever been able to find to the substance that these paintings were formed from is the dust on butterfly wings. And another little fun fact that's interesting is if you look at, if you have the chance to get up close with one of these Bang sisters portraits, there's no eyelashes for some reason on the people. Incredible, exquisite detail, but there's no eyelashes, and I don't have an answer for why that is. I want to grab a little book here. Give me just 1 second. So this is a great little booklet. There's not much to it, but this is some of the portraits of the Bang sisters. So this is May and Lizzie. And actually, some of you in the videos may have seen or have noticed commenting from Todd Leonard. Todd actually lives in the Bang sisters' old house at Camp Chesterfield. So that's very cool. But I'll show you some of, and I wish that the majority of these were in color. Most of these are, this book was printed in black and white. But these are the images that would appear. One of the largest paintings in the museum is of the woman with the roses. And some people say that you can never get the same count of the number of roses on the bush, that it's always changing. So the wonderful thing too, you know, with these spirit precipitations is that oftentimes the images change after they're already produced. They're not necessarily static. In one of the paintings at Camp Chesterfield, there was some sort of a comment from the sitter after the painting was produced that the loved one that appeared in the image was not wearing a certain piece of jewelry, and within minutes of saying that, I believe it was a necklace. The necklace appeared in the painting. So that is genuine spirit precipitation. Now, I do want to talk about an experience that I had that I personally believe was fraudulent, to do with an avenue of spirit precipitation, which is spirit cards. Now, I will say, I do believe that there are mediums who produce genuine spirit cards. I do not believe that the medium that I sat with produced genuine spirit cards. At least not on the day that I sat with the medium. So, with spirit cards, what happens is, usually how it goes for most precipitation mediums that do spirit cards, is they'll have a card basket. So this is just a little one. It's a tightly woven basket to create sort of a dark room, so to speak, inside the basket. And inside the basket are blank index cards and different crayons, paints, pencils, pens, inks, charcoals, all the things that you would use to create art. And then everything's sort of closed up. And then in the case that I participated in, while you're sort of waiting for these cards to be produced, the medium did billet reading, which isn't physical mediumship, it's an aspect of mental mediumship, but they were sort of combined in this seance. And the end result looks like, well, each medium's, what they produce looks a little bit different because they have different spirit teams and different guides working for them. But I'll give you an example of one of the spirit cards that came from this particular seance. Looks like this. So allegedly a blank card went in the basket, and then this comes out of the basket. And then on the back of the card are things like supposedly the names of your spirit guides and loved ones and things of that nature. Now, I will talk about my experience, and as I said, I cannot say for a fact that this medium was fraudulent. It is my opinion that what I experienced that particular day in that particular seance was not genuine, and I will give you a little bit of the reasons why that is. So, in this seance, and I'm not going to name names, I'm not going to say who this medium was, but there was probably 70 people, and we all gathered together, and I was very excited. I had very high expectations, which was my mistake. So we gathered together, and the medium, their assistants or their helpers hand out papers for the billet reading. Now, back in the old days of people like, Richard Ireland or Clifford Bias or whatever, they were phenomenal billet readers. Billet is just a French term. I believe it means paper, to where you might write a question or your name on a piece of paper, and the medium, oftentimes blindfolded, would grab a piece of paper, link with someone in the spirit world for you, give you a message, answer your question. Now, I was a little thrown off at first when on the paper itself, you had to put your full name, you had to put at least 2 or 3 of your loved ones in spirit, which I thought was weird because if you're a medium, why am I telling you who my dead people are? That's your job. And then write a question. So that kind of struck me as off, but I'm like, okay, I paid my money, I'm going to roll with this. We're going to see what happens. So they collect, you fold up the paper, they take like a little collection plate around, they gather up all the billets. The medium comes out. To this day, I'm not sure if the bumbling, sort of mindless persona was an act or genuine. But the medium comes out and talks a little bit about what to expect with spirit cards. Have someone open a blank pack of index cards and put them in the basket, mix everything up, set the basket to the side. So that kind of doesn't come back in again until later. Because while these images are forming, the medium is going to do billets. So there's this whole song and dance with the medium taping their eyes. Now, the thing about this is, I don't care how much tape you put over your eyes. If you don't press down here, if you just tape this way and this way and this way, this leaves a whole area here on either side that you can look down through. So the medium shittily tapes their eyes and then blindfolds themselves, and then they get the basket with the billets. So the first couple ones seem to go really well, and I'm like, damn, they're good. They're hitting specific names and things like that. And the people are crying. They're calling out, I have, someone here from the spirit world and they're looking for this person. And, the job will be okay and that sort of thing. But people seemed like they were moved. But then as I watched this demonstration, it was clear to me, one, that the medium was opening up the billets. Well, if you're blindfolded, and two, if you're getting your information from spirit, there's no need to open up the paper, because you're getting that information through touch and from the spirit world. So one, why are you opening the papers? And two, why do they need to be right side up? You could see that the medium was mixing them up and turning them around down in their hand to where they were right side up and open, which to me that was another big red flag. And they would often, as they walked around, hold the paper down away from them. Well, it was clear to me that they were looking down through the holes or the shitty tape job to read what was on the billet itself. So, after the whole song and dance is over, it's time to get to the cards, the part that everyone wants. They want to get their card. So, instead of having a random person, a participant, open the basket and hand out the cards to everyone, because supposedly your name would be on the back, and as well as your image on the front, and the messages or the loved ones or whatever that communicated, the medium took them to their podium, which was kind of slanted towards them. It was like a little lectern, but it was slanted towards the medium, and dumped it out and sorted all them out and fumbled around with them, because supposedly they were, I can't remember if they said I'm like a Virgo or something. I like things to be organized, and organized them all up, and then the medium handed them out. Fishy. So everyone gets their card. This card here was my boyfriend's, the card that he got, which is ironic because he's not religious at all, but it was like Jesus, and on the back of his card, none of his loved ones in spirit, but all of these spirit guides that could not be validated or confirmed, as well as Jesus and Joseph of Arimathea, and it just had, his message was very vague and kind of general, but he has a very unique name, so it's not like, he's not, I don't know, he's not very active online, so he's not Googleable. I will say that much. My partners are not very Googleable. So this was his card. He didn't want it, but I thought it was beautiful, even if it wasn't legitimate. So I framed it, and it sits in the seance room. Everyone's card, too, kind of these beautiful, deep colors, sort of these rainbow-esque things, and everyone was ooh and ah, and who'd you get, and what you get, and that sort of thing. And then I get my card, which didn't look like anybody else's in the rest of the seance. This was my card. This guy here looks like Colonel Sanders. And on the back of my spirit card are supposedly the names of the spirit people that work with me. Now, I love art, but I don't know if you can see this, but if Leonardo da Vinci is working with me, then he needs to step up his game, because I am rusty as shit when it comes to drawing. But the thing about it too, Chief Bright Moon, Serapis Bey, Dr. Warren, Dr. Bettner, Dr. Ganong, Goldenrod, do we all have spirit guides and we probably don't know who they are or what they do? Absolutely. But I also thought it was weird, I may not know every single spirit person that works with me. They don't care as much about that anyways. They don't care as much about names. It's more the connection and what we're able to accomplish together when we work with spirit. But I also find it very odd, too. None of my loved ones are on my card. And all of the spirit guides that are listed, not a single one I know. Granted, as I said, I might not be the best medium in the world, but I do know at least, the guides that I know, and the fact that none of them happen to put their name on here just didn't jive well with me. Now, the other thing, too, is you can see there's sort of these faint lines that go through these cards. One of the explanations that I've heard is that it's because, that's the energy that's being moved through the paper as these precipitations are being formed. I've heard other people say it's because it's from a printer. And on the outside is a waxy substance. Over here, I kind of took a quarter and sort of rubbed, and a waxy substance comes off the color. A little bit of the color comes off. Unlike, with the Bang Sisters, it's not a waxy substance. It's more of a powdery substance. Not that every medium's going to work the same, but again, just another comparison to notice. And it's also ironic to me too, with all of these people and their spirit cards, every single spirit for 70 people has the same handwriting. Give me a fucking break. Give me a break. So yeah, this is my spirit guide, Colonel Sanders, and I just wanted to show that to you. So, as I said, I do believe that there are people who can produce genuine spirit cards and genuine spirit precipitation. I just do not believe that the person that I sat with, or at least on that particular day, did. Now, since then, I've had the opportunity to talk to many other people who have sat with him, and I asked them, what's your opinion of this particular medium? And they all say the same thing. I thought it was sleight of hand. I thought it was trickery. When these cards are being fumbled around with before they're being passed out, I think that, at least my suspicion, is that pre-made cards were probably being swapped out for the blank cards in the basket. Part of the reason, too, why you need to register with the first and last name before you come to the seance. But nothing that I ever received was either specific enough to convince me or was ungoogleable. And if, again, with evidence, there needs to be things that are ungoogleable in this day and age. The other interesting thing about these spirit messages is when it comes to the loved ones, there was no message and there was no evidence. It was just, I have so-and-so here. I have Jack Johnson here. I have Bill Lewis here. I have, Sonia who wants to reach Megan. But all of the spirit personalities that were acknowledged was given by the medium exactly how it was written on the billet. If there was a first name and a last name, a first name and a last name was given. If it was just a first name was given. And then there was no evidence to go along to support the fact that that spirit person was actually there. And I found a lot of the messages to be sort of general, that could apply to anyone, or that we can interpret it to like, hey, yeah, that could probably apply to me as well. So again, I was not impressed. However, I do know a lot of people who know this particular medium and have sat with this particular medium and think that he is legit and hold a very high level of respect for that particular medium. I do not. So that is spirit precipitation. Now, the other thing that I want to touch on, and then I'll get to some of your guys' questions. Well, I guess I can't move on to the next part without talking about materialization. So another aspect of physical phenomena is materialization. So materialization is when, in the seance, as the medium is entranced through the production of ectoplasm and energy that's drawn from the sitters, enough of this ectoplasmic substance is formed that spirits can actually replicate the physical body that they had and appear in a way that is solid, and that their loved ones can touch them, hug them, interact with them, hold their hand, shake their hand. Materializations may be full materializations. Out of the spirit cabinet may step a fully materialized spirit person, or they may partially materialize. Maybe just a hand, or just a head, or from the chest up. And it's interesting too, a lot of times, it takes a lot of energy, a ton of energy for that to be able to happen. So there's a lot of fake photographs of materialization, but there are some real photographs of materialization. If you're interested in that, Google spirit photographs or materialization photographs from seances from people like Minnie Harrison, I'm blanking, Florence Cook, and the materializations of Katie King, where really for that moment in time in the seance room, that spirit person steps into, embodies sort of this physical body once again, and is able to interact. Now, sometimes there's so much detail, and other times they may just form detail of the face or the hair, but the body will just sort of be like a white robe, or they may have the head covered, and that's because if it's not necessary to produce that much detail, then they'll just sort of produce the basics and focus on the important part, which is, I think, where the old stereotype of like the ghost as a person in a sheet comes from, because that ectoplasm may look, like a long white sheet or a robe around the spirit person who materializes. Now, that is incredibly rare. I personally have not ever witnessed materialization. I hope to someday, but I personally have not experienced materialization. But yeah, Minnie Harrison, Florence Cook, Alec Harris, check those people out if you're interested in the materialization side of things. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is the difference in the types of energy that physical phenomena is communicating through. So I'm speaking about traditional physical phenomena through ectoplasmic means. A lot of what's been happening lately is that there's been a resurgence in spirit developing physical mediums and coming through in physical mediumship, and it's not as much ectoplasmic based. It works off a newer sort of energy. This was partially pioneered in the 90s by Robin Foy during the skull experiments, to where this energy-based phenomena, or I know one circle in particular where it's more of a hybrid, where it's partially ectoplasmic but partially energy-based. With this hybrid, or with this energy-based phenomena, there is not a need for the medium or mediums to be entranced. The medium is conscious and awake, and this phenomena does not have the same dangers that ectoplasmic-based phenomena does. If you make an incorrect behavior, if you touch the ectoplasm without permission, if you touch the medium, if a light comes on, you could severely harm or even kill the medium, as we see with Helen Duncan. The physical damage that ultimately led to her death after a seance was broken into, and the retraction of the ectoplasm into the body caused very significant physical harm and damage to her physical body and her health. So unlike ectoplasmic-based phenomena, with energy-based phenomena, if something happens, like a light comes on, or someone were to bust in, or the medium was to be touched, or something like that, something inappropriate happened, the medium would not be harmed. The phenomena would just cease. It would just stop in its tracks. So it's much safer. Some people have said that it's harder to control, that the spirit world has a harder time controlling it, that there's more experience with that ectoplasm. I don't know if that's true or not. The seances that I've had the pleasure and that I've had the privilege of sitting in on were sort of this blend of ectoplasm and energy based, and it seemed very controlled to me. But Robin Foy, during the skull experiments, sort of helped pioneer in some of this new energy. So what this energy is, what their spirit team called creative energy, is kind of this culmination of the energy of the sitters, natural earth energy from ley lines or natural phenomena, and a certain element that the spirit world blends, and those three things sort of come together, and the chemist and the spirit physicians and scientists and operators that work on the other side sort of harmonize those sources to create the perfect energy that's able to produce things like levitation or voice, or in that particular instance, it wouldn't be materialization, it would be more of an etherealization, more of like a holographic projection as opposed to a solid figure. But still, it is true physical mediumship in that it's objective, that everyone in the seance room would be able to objectively see and observe the same thing. It's not subjective, it doesn't rely on your senses, your inner intuitive senses. You're observing it and taking it in with the physical senses, your physical sight, your physical feeling, your physical hearing. Another tool that I'll just briefly mention here too is the use of the glass dome in some of the physical approaches to sitting for development. And basically it's just a glass dome with a wooden base that sits about an inch up off the ground. There's about a half an inch hole drilled through the base, and it allows energy to be stored and collected in the dome that can sort of act as a battery. I know in the skull experiments, the spirit team would produce spirit lights inside the dome, and it would sort of illuminate to kind of be a light that is safe for everyone, that the phenomena can be witnessed in lighted conditions with light that was provided not from the physical world, but light that was produced and provided by the spirit world itself. So, that being said, as I said, I wanted to bring this up because while physical mediumship was very popular in the Victorian era and even up until, you know, the 40s, 50s, 60s, at different places and camps, it sort of became out of vogue, and now it's kind of becoming back in vogue, or at least more known. And the thing that really irritates me is that a lot of people either see it as a bandwagon to jump on, or there's a lot of fraudulent stuff. So I wanted to give you an idea of true and genuine physical phenomena and things to look for. The most important thing is, with any physical seance, use your common sense, and you should be able to feel the presence of spirit. There should be evidence. If you're using your common sense, if you feel the presence of spirit, and if there's evidence, then chances are you're having some sort of a genuine spiritual experience. If not, you know, if you can rationalize or explain how something was done, chances are it was probably done that way. So as I said, there's the fraudulent aspect, and then again, it just irritates me when there's something as sacred as physical mediumship and people see it as a bandwagon that can be jumped on. Because physical mediumship, it said, I believe, 1 in 100,000 people have the chemical conditions and the physical composition necessary to be able to develop as a physical medium. I don't know how that's true. I don't know how true that is or how you would be able to calculate that. And 2, physical mediumship isn't something that you just develop. You know, the ability to, tip a table does not mean you're a physical medium, and you shouldn't run around calling yourself a physical medium. It just irritates me when people see this as a bandwagon that you can jump on, when in reality, you must be incredibly dedicated, and you must sit for this and carve out time for this. And, you know, you may sit for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years before you even get anything as much as a knock or a rap, you know, like the Fox sisters had. Now, I know that there was a story of 2 women that I heard. One of the times I was at Camp Chesterfield, I had the pleasure of visiting some friends there, and in their home, they found some leftover things from mediums that belonged there, and they're showing all the things they had inherited, old spirit trumpets and silk precipitations and all of these really cool things, old slates and stuff from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. And they were sharing a story about these 2 sisters that were mediums. And the one sister was just a natural physical medium. She was able to produce and get the trumpets up and all that sort of thing. And the other sister sat for physical phenomena for, I think it was probably 20 years or longer. And she finally figured, well, I've been sitting for 20 years, it just must not be meant to be. And very shortly after that, after almost 20 plus years of sitting, that night, the trumpet finally lifted, and they got some direct voice. So you never know, and that's why I think that true, genuine physical mediumship is very rare, because most people aren't willing to put in the time and the effort and say, okay, I might sit for 30 years and nothing happens, but I'm still going to have the motivation and the passion to sit for this. So chances are, if someone just pops up out of the blue and starts calling themselves a physical medium, they are not. There are some physical mediums who are out there, as I said, that I'm very suspicious of. There are some who, in my opinion, from what I know, I hold to a higher standard, and I believe are genuine. But some of the genuine physical mediums that I have met are very private about it. They're not out for publicity. They're not putting on public seances. It's done behind closed doors and in private home circles. So I just wanted to inform you with that. It's an interesting topic that's not talked about a lot. Another thing too, if you're more interested in learning more about physical mediumship, there's a fella in the UK by the name of Scott Milligan, who, from what I hear and some of the people that I know who've had the pleasure of sitting with him, is a phenomenal physical medium, and he does live feeds or live streams regularly. And I've listened to many of them, and I've downloaded some of his seances that are on his website. And to me, he comes across as genuine, sincere, and dedicated. So check out Scott if you're interested. And I know that there's been some controversy, I guess is the word I'm looking for, over the late Colin Fry, who earlier on in his career was known as Lincoln. There was some controversy around some potential fraud, but I do think that from my research and from my experiences of what I found as far as video and audio of him, I do believe that he had produced genuine physical phenomena. Scott Milligan. So my battery is yelling at me that I'm on 9%, but I know I haven't looked at questions here, so I'm going to go through and see if there's any questions before I jump off here. Patrick Keller, I'd love to have you on my podcast. Patrick, you can, I would be happy to do that. You can just shoot me an email at travissanders89@gmail.com or travispsychic@yahoo.com. Madeline, do you recommend a particular meditation that would be helpful to connect with the other side? Also, what is your opinion of binaural beats? I've never really used binaural beats, so I can't speak to that. I do have on my website, though, a list of other mediums that I think are reputable. How often do you find or suspect fraud at Lilydale or Chesterfield? Lilydale physical mediumship has been banned. So I have noticed that this year, for the first time in decades, they have a couple people who are alleged physical mediums coming to put on some sort of workshop or seance. I would say if you're interested, go with an open mind, but I personally, and I would too if I had the chance to get up there during those particular times, I would go and sit in on those seances, but I'm iffy about who's doing it. And again, I can't say anything about these people for sure because I do not know. I've never sat in and had a first-hand experience, but from what I've seen, what I've read, my observations, my opinion, I'm a little iffy. Chesterfield, I've not participated in any physical stuff at Camp Chesterfield. I don't believe that there are actually any physical mediums who are working or conducting much physical mediumship anymore, as most of them are older. I believe it was Patricia Kennedy, who was a phenomenal physical mediumship. She's not producing physical phenomena anymore because of health and age and stuff like that. So while, it used to be very popular at camp, I don't think it's something that's... I think it's done. I think it's probably done behind closed doors, but as far as publicly, I don't really think that they offer anything much either as far as physical phenomena. But I do know that there have been some good, genuine physical mediums, like Louise Irving. I hear glowing things from, but I also know too that in camp's history, like any spiritualist camp, there have been fraudulent things. What are the thoughts about the glass dome that they used? So, in my seance room, when we sit for the development of physical mediumship, I put the seance, I put the dome on the table. We've not had anything happen with it or from it yet, so I don't really know. The jury's out on the dome for us, if it will even become anything or do anything. But it looks cool. I like the way it looks. It's it adds to the vibe of the seance room. So, looks like that was all the questions, so to speak. I hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, Patrick, get a hold of me. Check out Scott. Check out some of the older physical mediums. Leslie Flint, Gordon Higginson was also, as well as mental and trance. He was phenomenally gifted with pretty much anything that he did in the realm of mediumship. Produced physical mediumship. Mina Crandon, Florence Cook, there are so many, Clifford Bias, I'm just thinking and sort of drawing a blank. You know, the Bang sisters, Emily French, Daniel Douglas Hume, excuse me. You know, there's all sorts of them. So, you know, research, dig, have fun, explore the history. It's important to know our history, where we came from, and it gives us a direction on where we're going. So enjoy your weekend, everyone. I'll talk to you later.